Media has been notified. NOACA conducts its meetings according to Robert's Rules of Order. Actions during the meeting will be taken by voice vote. If any member feels the need to abstain from any vote due to a conflict of interest, he or she should state their intention to abstain when the matter is introduced by the chair for presentation for the record. Subsequently, that member shall not participate in any discussion of the matter for which a conflict exists. According to Robert's rules, absence from a meeting does not require a member to abstain from voting on the minutes. If the member still wishes to abstain, he or she should state their intention for the record. For the benefit of our guests from the public and the recording of this meeting, please be sure to speak into a microphone. The microphones can be turned on and off using the gray button on top of them. They are on when the light is blue. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second? All those in favor? Opposed? Minutes approved. Next is public comments. Has anyone signed in to speak today? Since no one has signed in, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is our executive director's report. Any report, Grace?
I have no report for this subcommittee.
Thank you. Next, we have no action items, but I would like to move on to presentations and discussion. First, we have the internal strategic plan. Suzanne Miklos of OE Strategies.
Sorry, I thought it was blue. Sorry about that. I appreciate the opportunity to walk through this plan with your committee, as I know that one of your very most important responsibilities is to support the agency in building its organizational effectiveness and its culture, and that was certainly the goal of this plan. I am happy to take questions at any time as I'm moving through, and I am going to go through in a little bit more detail to provide some commentary than I did in the full board presentation. So to me, it is a really exciting journey for an organization to fully commit to building a great place to be an employee. And when we talk to people who work at NOACA, just as I know you as board members, people have an intense passion for the public good and the work that the organization does. And at the same time, we're all living together in a work family, if you will, and some of the things that happen in our families are highly effective, and some of the things that happen in our families are less effective. And so really taking that opportunity to say, how are we doing and what can we do better is both a prudent and a brave thing to do, right? Because every answer isn't the perfect one. This project actually started in February a year ago. Meeting with the steering committee, I have to say that the major heavy lifting of this work was certainly done by the NOACA steering committee, the directors, and by Director Glucci. The initial meeting with the steering committee really was to say, what do we want to do and how do we want to make sure that all voices are heard? We conducted interviews, we conducted a survey, there was a all-staff vision session where we discussed the results of everything and really had some very open and robust dialogue about what makes it great to work here, but what stands in the way. Some of the things that you see reflected in the report are that people are committed. There is a strong sense of expertise here. There is a sense of stakeholder and community stewardship and ownership that people bring to their work. Some of the things that people talked about that got in the way were, as you have turnover, knowledge might get lost. As I'm working closely with my department team, it may be more difficult to coordinate cross departments. As we as leaders all communicate down to our staff, people may start to hear or perceive slightly different messages. So just as those things occur in many organizations and most of our organizations, those were some of the themes that appeared here. And really the steering committee and the organization as a whole started to say, so how do we make those things better by building on our strengths? While all organizations need to have an external vision, having an internal vision statement is a really powerful way to think about how do we want to live together as a work group and what do we want it to be like to be part of this work team, welcome, and environment. So a couple of key words in this. Unlocking. So being able to use all of our potential as individuals and as an organization. Diverse expertise. There is a huge amount of brain power in this organization, and being able to really unlock that diverse expertise in how people work together and communicate together. And making NOACA a great place to work. We hear that a lot, but to wake up in the morning and know that the work that you do has meaning and purpose, which people already knew, but also to know that I have a high probability of having a great day at work today. That's really what we mean when we invest in making it a great place to work. And by doing all of those things, the organization never loses sight of its ultimate mission, which is to improve the quality of life in Northeast Ohio. So I will say as an external consultant that it was inspiring to watch these conversations and to realize as a community member how much people care about maximizing the work that they do. I won't read through the cultural values, but they're important because they give us a North Star in terms of how we want to treat each other. They also give us guidance in terms of some of the activities and components that you would see in the plan. So I would even encourage you as a committee that this might be something that you keep in the back of a notebook somewhere and that you refer to as the organization's talking about and dreaming about future plans. These values in the culture ideally should be reflected in any of the work that you do. And I think you'll see all of these reflected in the plan and in the progress so far. As we look at organizational effectiveness, the way that this work came out and the way that the committee shaped the work really flows very nicely into any model that you would have of what makes a good system. Leadership is, of course, critical, but then how all of us work together, which you could see that foundational work in the previous slide. But it's no fun to go to work if all your tools are broken. And that's an extreme statement, but that's what we mean by starting to look at systems and processes and software and tools. You know, it's the Stephen Covey, if I have 8 hours to cut down a tree, I'm going to spend the first 6 hours sharpening my axe. And that's really what these pieces are about, is being able to be sharp as an organization and do our best work because we've organized ourselves in ways that make a lot of sense. And remember that when you have turnover and that when you're really doing work that is very big for the size organization you have, it's easy to neglect some of those things, right? So we put a piece of duct tape on it and we keep going. And this is an opportunity to stand back and say really what would work best for us. There's also, which will help you as a committee, a nice layout of timing, so that it's important not to say we're going to do all of these things differently tomorrow, but that you really look over that year time frame. We will be conducting the engagement survey again over the next few months, working on timing relative to, I recommend it is when the plan actually started, as opposed to precisely a year from the last survey. That will allow you to see progress as an organization and then to take what of those goals were completed and say, okay, what's the next stretch for us? So this becomes a way of life, not just a project. I am not going to address all of these items, but I know that you received a copy of the ISP in preparation for this meeting. And I thought and hoped that it would be helpful if I just gave some high-level whys for some of the, in the dark blue, what we're really trying to do. Talent is something that every single client I have talks about. It is difficult to have all of the right talent in the organization fully engaged simply because of the labor economics. And so focusing as an organization on how we cultivate and nurture talent and developing some tools and engaging staff in that. That's a really important bucket because that stabilizes people's ability to work well together, and it also will greatly impact turnover. And when somebody's thinking about where do I want to work, we want NOACA to be up there at the top of the list. And that really leads to that becoming an employer of choice. So when early action was developing the employee value proposition, I think sometimes this is a group of fairly humble people. And so with that employee value proposition, to be able to say, here is what we do and how you get to make a difference in the world and what it will be like to work in this organization. So those actions are to support that overarching goal. Just some tactical stuff, right? The improvement of basic HR processes that make it easy for people to get those vacancies filled in a timely fashion, remove any process challenges, and have a process along that employee life cycle then that includes onboarding, performance management, and development. So it's not that nothing good was happening in these spaces, but making it consistent and all tied together and really thinking about it from a life cycle perspective is powerful. There are times when people can make decisions and they don't know they can make those decisions. And there's other times when we just haven't thought that this staff member or this team has grown to the point where then maybe they can own a bit more of this discussion or decision or action. The executive team, this senior management team, is having some great conversations about this. And also there's work going on to clarify where people own a decision and where people are making a recommendation. So I know a large part of the work product of this agency is to make recommendations and really educating staff and helping them and tooling them in that regard. The systems and processes, when we have turnover, when our projects change, when knowledge gets diluted, these are just being able to say, let's make sure everybody knows how to use our systems, that we're using them consistently, and that we're using them maybe on a wider range of projects than we did in the past to get everybody up to speed and aligned. You were part of a board survey, and one of the reasons for that was this action, being able to say, are there ways that we can be really efficient and support each other and take advantage of work that we've already done as we're serving our board and making sure that we do that in a way that is meaningful and appropriate to you. These are just good project management pieces, but putting them back in place, right? Sometimes we slip away from habits. And really looking at, as things evolve over time, how are we continuing to coordinate and coordinating across departments? So maybe my department is fully aware, but are we talking as much as we should to the next department? And it's really powerful that you're enabling the staff of the agency to take some ownership for this, because it can't always just be the SMT's job or the director's job to communicate everything to every person rather. So it's building those in institutionally and across the organization. One of the projects that I know is underway is improving an intranet and being able to organize information in a way that it's more easily accessible for people as a single source of truth. And so that's some work that's underway as well. And then finally, in terms of leadership, you know, great leaders are never afraid to look at themselves and to look in the mirror and to say, what can we do better? And the SMT and Grace have been working together as a director group to talk about how are we communicating? How are we encouraging our staff to talk to each other? How are we making sure that as we cascade information, that it has the intended, right? You've all heard the game of telephone. What we say in this room may not be what's heard in this room. And so that group is working together to really tighten up, measure, and continue to improve communication, and even investing a little bit in their own team building and how they work together as a team. And then there are some items that Grace is looking at in terms of potentially looking at additional roles, providing process and tools, which part of the work that we're doing on an every other month basis to the senior management team, and being able to continue to be that coach and setting those shared leadership behavior expectations. It's kind of, we all have a unique personality, and we all want to have certain standards and ways that we're leading that create clarity and a sense of community for our staff. So I went through that fairly quickly because I wanted to leave time for you to discuss and to ask questions. As I move to questions, I just would point out that you will see and hear about work that has already been underway. So there is a culture committee, there have been activities and team building, there are processes and communication, intranet, suggestion box. So this work is being managed and monitored by the steering committee, and certainly by the director group as well. So questions, comments, reactions?
Chris, go ahead. The first.
Oh, just want to thank you for the report and the work. Looks like several months of iteration with the staff and the leadership team. The 360, just curious, kind of like the outtakes of the 360, and also how do you make that an iterative process going forward?
Absolutely. There has not been a 360 of single leaders conducted yet. The outcomes of the survey, really some highlights would be that the results were, I would say, in the average range. So they weren't anything that you would say, we don't need to do any work, but they also weren't anything that would cause us great concern. So being able to move from average or from good to better is what we're looking at. Communication, feeling like I understand what decisions I can make, feeling like I am fully empowered to do my role and understand how it fits into every other role. Those were some of the themes that came out, and you can really see those reflected in the plan. The positives were a lot about, I love being here, I love the work I do, I love the expertise that I get to share. And we will be re-administering the survey somewhere in the next few months to look at progress, and then that would allow them to iterate the plan.
That's great. Thank you. And I think the intranet's a great idea too for communication purposes, obviously.
Thank you.
Suzanne, can you take us through again? I just wanted to understand better, when you went through the presentation, there seemed to be multiple positions that were recommended. Is that correct? And what were those positions again?
The first position was an HR position, and that may be something that you would like Grace to speak to. My understanding or memory, since now this has been a year, was that there was two part-time people fulfilling some of the HR duties. And the recommendation was to have more HR presence available to people. One of the things that the organization did also was do education on the employee resource program, because that also offers employee support, and it seemed to be some HR type of support, even though it's of more personal nature, that people weren't aware of its availability. So that would be the first bucket. And then the second bucket was to consider And I believe that the organization in the past has had something akin to a chief of staff or COO type of role. And so looking at having that kind of integrator is how we would think of it from an organizational structure perspective. Role was also recommended.
And then the training and development of staff, et cetera, that was falling under the HR position. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, so there were a couple ways to think about how you structured that in terms of a resource that was more generalist and focused or more specific on the training and development.
Thank you. Any other questions for Suzanne?
Hi, Suzanne. I'm Kyle Dreyfus Wells. Nice to meet you. Thanks for your report. Just a couple things. I didn't see it in here and I might have missed it, but who's on the steering committee? Is it the senior leadership?
No, thank you so much for asking that. So I don't know that I have all the names written down, but the steering committee was a diagonal slice,
Okay.
cross-sectional group that I believe about 12 people. I'm just trying to count around the table. So we represented all departments and all levels.
On the steering committee?
Yes.
And did the steering committee have a chair?
The steering committee was coordinated by Sarah, and Liz helped do some of the coordination. But we had the group facilitated very much as an inclusive body that came to consensus on issues.
Okay. And do you have any tracking of implementation of these recommendations yet?
The organization does, so I provided some examples of things that have been completed, but the steering committee is tracking all of the specific items that are completed.
Oh.
So examples would be the employee value proposition has been posted on the website. Work has gone into recruiting. The culture committee has been holding activities. The intranet is well underway. I believe some of the project work and that I couldn't be specific about is underway. I think I mentioned the intranet is pretty far along. The suggestion box is up and the SMT is meeting every other month to have those leadership discussions. So those are things that I, as an external person, am aware of. But certainly, you know, there's a more formal reporting list within the steering committee.
Okay. Thank you.
So the steering committee, it's an internal group, right, within
Yes.
the organization? That's great. I mean, I think part of the thing is how does this live after your contract is up, so to speak? And wanted to ask you about that. And that's to Grace too. Is this ongoing or is your work kind of closed out and where are you at in your phase of your contract?
I think it's somewhat ongoing.
Oh,
I mean,
good.
we completed the ISP. We are now working on the implementation of the
Yeah.
ISP. So there is additional work that OE Strategies is
Yeah.
doing for us, particularly at the senior staff level.
Okay, that's great. I was kind of hoping for that, but just curiosity then, you know, you mentioned the survey from the 360. Do you think there's room for further 360 work, I guess? Just thinking, I mean, it sounds like already there's great camaraderie within the steering committee, tracking
Mhm.
goals and objectives, but just kind of deep dive and hearing from people. Is there room for that to either of you really, Suzanne or Grace? You know, just kind of iterating further with staff as we go on the 360. It strikes me that because we as a board, we pay a lot of attention to CEO as we should, and that's our board's job. But you know, working with you, Grace, to lift up the whole organization and kind of the inputs and feedbacks from the staff. We don't get into the weeds on that as board members, but just curious if there's a process to do that.
Yeah, so we've been talking about an actual process to do a 360 for the senior team. And that would be part of the performance review process this year. And that would engage OE Strategies to do that.
Good, thank you.
Yes. I would imagine, and the steering committee has been very active, that there will be opportunities once that survey is completed of the staff to bring people together to have them talk and react. So one of the pieces that I've appreciated about the way the agency has approached this process is there have been several all-staff meetings. I mean, it's a nice size organization for that, where people are really able to look at the results and the progress and all weigh in. So I would imagine that continuing.
Over here. Well, hopefully you can hear me. That work? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for the information. Just a quick question on number 9, if I'm looking at the right one about KPIs. Can you delve into that a little bit more, if it's appropriate, about what the process for that might look like? It says add key performance indicators to job descriptions. I'm not as concerned with the job descriptions, but more just the overall process for KPI development. Had that been talked about? Would that be an internal or external exercise? And would that fall in line with strategic plan? How would that go?
I believe that is an internal exercise, and my understanding, and then maybe Grace could provide some more information. One of the things people liked was the work plan process, and really doing some more education on how to use the OWP so that I understand how my job connects. So now that I answered OD, Grace can answer maybe more specifically.
And actually, I think you hit it. We are in the process of really taking a better look at our performance process, which I think we've reviewed with you last time. The KPIs, I guess, not so much for the job description, but the job description being included as part of the performance plan, and therefore the metrics being part of the performance plan. Right now, we do have metrics, but they're not consistently applied across the organization, and they're not necessarily building upwards as they should. So we're going to be a little bit more intentional about developing those KPIs and ensuring that they support each level as you go going up or down or across.
One other question, if I may, on number 5 was conducting a training or conduct training on communication. Is that considered internal or external assistance needed to be able to do that? Or are we talking about retreats or annual meetings? What
Which
does that look
number are
like?
you?
Number 5.
Number 5.
Go back to number 5. I guess I can
The
too.
so conduct training on communication and how to foster a spirit of collaboration.
So we're thinking of both. As part of our normal retreats, we meet annually in a organizational setting, and then from there launch, usually it's to kick off our year of performance and then move forward. We're thinking about and have in the last meeting that we had in December focused more on communication and collaboration. And we will continue to do that at the organizational level, but then we are also looking at a sort of a menu of trainings that would focus on communication and collaboration that would be for individual staff members.
I just to kind of add to that question on the KPIs. So the KPIs are not part of each individual. I just want to make sure, does each individual, based on their job description, understand what the key performance indicators are?
We don't refer to them as KPIs at this time yet. We refer to them as metrics, and each performance plan has an objective, a goal, and a metric. And so, yes, they do have those for each of their jobs, but they're not necessarily, they may vary from employee to employee, even if they have the same job. And they should be a little bit more consistent, and they should be a little bit more supportive of the roles above and below and across. They need to fit better, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
All right, thank you. And
Oh, sorry, just to piggyback, are there KPIs for the organization that those individual KPIs will link back to?
That's what we're trying to work
Okay.
on. So currently we have, for the organization, we have the OWP, and there are performance metrics within the OWP, but again, they're not at a really high enough level where you could say, this is what the organization is, how it's measuring success other than projects and, studies and things that we're working on. So we have done some work in the past on trying to put together what we're calling organizational performance metrics, or we have some strategic and some tactical, and so we're still working on that. We haven't really brought it together yet, but that would be a focus based on the ISP.
If I may, these are really helpful questions for a committee to ask, because it helps think about how to connect, how I know if I'm doing well across the whole employee life cycle, and then back up to the organization. And that's some work that, as the organization works on, it's nice to have people ask those insightful questions or share examples of how you've seen that elsewhere. Because it ideally, and it's not easy or everybody would do it, ideally it's clear from the job posting through my performance evaluation, through the organization's overall goals, how my work is contributing.
And we do have a regional strategic plan that is for the work of the organization in terms of how it affects and impacts the community. So there needs to be a better linkage between those performance metrics and the ones in people's performance reviews. So that's one of the things that we're working on as well.
Mayor, so is there a time frame on this plan? Like, is it a 3-year plan? Is it a 2-year plan? Is it a 1-year plan? Is it a week? Is it 1 week?
Well, I
plan?
tried to suggest it should be a 1-year plan, but I think I was being a little too aggressive. So,
And I guess, you can decide that, Grace, that's up to you. But I would like to see if we could, that implementation tracker,
Yeah.
if we could see that on a regular basis or quarterly
do that
basis,
quarterly,
something.
sure.
Yeah, and I do think it would be nice, I think, for staff to put some kind of, so there's a sense of urgency to the implementation of the plan. I think that would be,
So that is why we put the time, and the staff were able to select which ones they thought were short, medium, and long term. But yeah, I would concur that there needs to
gotcha.
be more of a sense of urgency, or there needs to be a sense of urgency.
Great.
Yes.
Okay.
It's a balance of people's appetite and sense of urgency, to your point. And then when you move really into the work and it has change management in it, it is not unusual for people to have a 1-year plan that actually takes closer to 2 to fully implement.
I have no problem with that if you're in the change management curve. It's just if you're not on the curve,
Correct. Yes.
that's not, yeah.
Yes. So when you look at this timeline here, I was just suggesting none of us would be surprised that it's a little optimistic. But to your point, it is moving and people are talking about it, which is really important. And so you putting eyes on it as well helps.
Any other questions for Suzanne? Thanks, Suzanne. We
Thank
appreciate-
you. Thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Suzanne. Suzanne has been, and her firm have been very helpful to us as an organization, and she's worked very, very well with the team. So thank you.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your meeting.
Thank you. Next, Grace, you want to, I guess we'll talk through the HR job description and
Right.
recruitment plan.
Yeah, for those of you that you needed copies, I do have copies. So this job description includes input from senior staff, as well as some of their staff who gave them input to give to me. It includes feedback from this committee, and particularly from our chair and vice chair. It includes information that came from my fellow MPOs and their positions that were similar. It also had very specific delineations to what job descriptions I received from this subcommittee as well. So there was a lot of feedback that went into this, a lot of other work. And I want to thank Lindy Burt for helping me put all of this together. We worked on this a lot, but particularly yesterday when I got back from Washington late last week and started putting together the different pieces of it. We have the position as a director position titled Associate Director, which means that it does not have a department or division budget. It reports in directly to executive. So it is part of the executive budget and the executive organization. The summary is very much like positions throughout the organization where they give you just the highlight, and it's usually that piece of it that is the first piece that someone might see if they're applying for the job. So that kind of encapsulates it. Then we usually have duties and responsibility that are listed as technical as well as general. And then we have credentials and experience as well as knowledge, skills, and abilities. I know it's longer probably than usual. I don't know that you often see a 3-page or 2.5-page job description, but we thought we would rather be more inclusive than less inclusive. So we did put that in there, but still open to any kind of feedback if you think that it ought to be a little bit more streamlined. The idea was really to make this a synthesis of all those documents and input that I mentioned before. The focus within the technical, which relates specifically to the job as an HR director, is to, I don't want to read all of it, but to look at developing, recommending, administering, and communicating policies and procedures, collaborating with the senior management team, implementing planning processes that evaluate organizational structure, job design, succession planning, and staffing for the organization. Very much your standard routine HR director type of duties.
So Grace, I think this is actually very comprehensive. The one question I do have is, and tell me what your thoughts are, is this particular position is going to be a position where we're looking for, more of a high level HR professional, but at the same time, they're going to have to do a little bit of the technical work. So I just want to make sure that that's represented in there. So you have somebody that understands clearly that, they're a department of one, even though they're going to be collaborating with the whole staff. Sometimes individuals that are at this level are used to having more administrative help or HR generalist help. So just, and again, it doesn't have to necessarily be represented in the job description, but I think when we are recruiting for this position, we need to be clear on what those expectations are.
No, I appreciate that. And that's the same issue that we have with the current director positions, even those that do have staff, because we're such a small organization. There is no director position that just manages. They all roll up their sleeves and they all do technical work in order to get the job done. So I commend my senior team. They know how hard it is to do both. And so they are doing both. And this position would be no different, except that it's a position of one, which makes it even more challenging.
Katie?
So where would this be on the organizational chart? If it's not a director position, but it's.
The direct report to me is part of the executive department.
Kyle?
So Grace, I think this is good. Two things, like a logistics question. So we had talked about like all the payroll function and stuff like that. That's in your finance department, right? So this,
Right.
and then the compliance side, like the I-9s and stuff like that, that's all in finance.
Correct.
Okay. So I think, to the mayor's point, I think it would be helpful in the recruiting to acknowledge that this is in some ways an entrepreneurial position. Like, you have to build this HR function based on all the good work that's already done. So if somehow we could articulate that in the recruiting materials, and talk to folks about the support that they will have, but that, they're coming into kind of an existing HR function that's being handled very well, and you basically want to take it to the next level. I think also, the fact that you have it connected to the internal strategic plan is really good. I don't know. I just think we need to acknowledge that recruiting for this is going to be a little tricky.
And I appreciate the use of the word entrepreneurial. I think that's a great way to express what we're looking for.
Yeah.
And Chris?
Just at the risk of concurring with everything that's been said, but saying it a different way. No, I think the position description is great. It's nice that you talk about the collaboration with folks in other places, finance, and other the legal team and so on and so on. My question is actually, and I really appreciate this committee's counsel to bump this from a generalist position to a director position. Is the variance in associate director as classified versus the summary as stated as director, is that just a pay grade issue? Is that to fit it into a pay grade, or?
To fit it into the pay grade and the classification, because they will not have a division. So
Yeah,
there'll be a solo shop.
okay, but the position as stated in the summary is the director,
Is a
right?
director, correct?
Despite
It's
it
a
being
director level
associate
position
director.
and it's still part of the senior management team.
Yeah.
For
Which-
example, Liz Barlick's position is an associate director position. She reports directly to me and is part of the executive division.
Okay, but she's a classified as associate director, but as a director, so to speak, as a direct report to you?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, I just compliment this committee for bumping it up from a generalist to director, because I think it dignifies where we're trying to go with this and support you as well, so.
So it is really distinguished from directors because
Yeah.
they have a division with multiple people and a budget.
But the DBA is director, at least on the position summary.
Correct. That is
Okay.
correct.
And again, I agree completely with what everybody said about trying to position this as something that's, as you said, entrepreneurial innovation, takes somebody who's kind of a player manager in this role, if you will, because they're gonna have to do some general, the more mundane side of a job like this, but because they don't have any staff beneath them, but they also gonna do the leadership work with you, I think. So somehow picking it
Right.
up in the job description makes sense.
And actually, there's a lot of exciting stuff that this individual is going to get involved with for the organization, so it's,
I didn't mean to understate that. I just,
Yeah.
it strikes me that you're gonna need support on just some general tactical stuff that you gotta do when an employee has to,
tricky.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're the expert on this, Chair, but there's just day-to-day work they gotta do, but I think strategic leadership, visioning with you, working off OE's work and helping guide the future of the organization with you and your senior management team. It's kind of seems to be both of those at once.
Mayor, I would think too, with working with the other directors, that's gonna be a natural thing. 'Cause it's gonna affect the people that work under them. That there's gonna be a natural help coming in too. So I too like their entrepreneurial word in there, because that just says, we've given you a nice framework. It was something to build on and something we don't have right now. Let's get it to that next level.
Any other questions on the job description?
Just a
Go
quick
ahead.
question about work from home availability versus virtual versus in the office. Will it follow the same requirement as all other staff? And then,
Yes.
okay. So that's a split, right? That's a,
We have one work at home day and it's a Monday and it's the same day for everybody. So we close the building, which saves us on energy as well as gives people the flexibility to plan their week out.
got it. Thanks.
All right, thanks, everyone. Let's move on to, so was there other? No, let's move on to the HR manual review. Grace?
Yeah, so I did send out the HR manual after our last meeting. I don't know if you've had a chance to take a look at it. And if you have any particular comments, my general comment is it's a decent document. Certainly can have some improvement, and this would be one of the functions of the new HR director to take this document and bring it to that next level. But I didn't know if anyone had any particular questions or comments on the document.
When was the last time it was
So
reviewed or updated?
So we update it pretty regularly for individual sections. So if something comes up, then we evaluate it and we'll update that section. The wholesale review was done by our consultant, I think 2 years ago now.
Uh, Chair, if I can ask, what's best practice in terms of timeliness of review and updates?
Actually,
does it vary?
I think how she just described it
Yep.
is fine. It's been, comprehensive review within the last couple of years and she's updating it as needed. So, I mean, it's one of those things that you want to do on a regular basis. So.
Yep.
I'm all
Any-
for the new director looking at this 59 pages. I tried to get through it. A lot of it's smoking policy and things like that. So it's pretty.
Any other questions on the HR manual? We do appreciate you passing that around to everyone. And obviously it's had a legal review of the HR manual by your legal team.
It was initially developed by legal counsel, and then it has been, the review we had 2 years ago was with our consultant who is also an HR attorney.
Any other questions on the manual? All right, thanks. I would like to move into executive session at this time. Can I have a motion for the HR Personnel and Organizational Development Subcommittee to adjourn to executive session pursuant to ORC 121 .22G1 to consider the compensation of the executive director? Can I have a motion? So moved by Jen. Is there a second? Seconded by Richard. Roll call?
Mayor Costelli,
Yes.
Kyle Dreyfus Wells, John Gall, Commissioner Regovich, County Executive Ronayne,
Yes.
Katie Taylor, India Birdsong Terry,
Okay, the motion is approved. We are out of executive session. We will finish up the rest of the agenda. I think next on the agenda, any reports? I don't believe there's any other reports. No old business, no new business. So can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? Oh my God, I forgot to
I know, I
do
was
the
like-
most important part of what we're gonna do. Okay, sorry, I was already moving on to something I've got to get to. I've got a council meeting next. Okay, sorry about that. So any motion is off at this point. And do we have we need India? Do we have a quorum?
Do we need,
John, we have a quorum?
we do have a quorum?
Oh, no. You need five.
I wanted to make sure we have a quorum.
Right.
Sorry, I was on to my apologies.
I thought it was just me.
I was on to the next thing. It's-
Okay. I got you a quorum there.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Get them swept up in the progress of everything.
Okay, so I do have some new business. I apologize. So what I would like to do is move to make a motion that we recommend the 2025 performance goals and competencies for the executive director, Grace Galucci. I have a motion,
So moved.
second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Been approved, so thank you very much. Already gone through everything else, so next I'm gonna make is there any other? Yes,
No business.
thank you. So I'm gonna make, next I would like to ask for a motion to adjourn. So moved, second, meeting, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed, meeting is adjourned. Thank you.